Pew-Pew.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the J Situation. Today, I'm going to be giving an overview of one of my favorite firearm products, and that's the SWR Trident 9 sound suppressor. So, right here in front of me, I have all original SWR paraphernalia for this suppressor or silencer, except for this spanner wrench used to disassemble the 3-lug mount. But all this other stuff is what you used to be able to get from SWR when they were in existence. And so before we go into this review slash kind of look at this product, I want to give a little bit of a history lesson on SWR as a company for those of you who don't know who they are or who they were, and kind of how the technology that they brought forward is or has kind of infiltrated the current silencer state of the art, as it were. So back kind of over a decade ago, the SWR Trident came out, and here you can see this is the original instruction manual, and kind of in keeping with Department of Defense nomenclature, SWR chose to use the TM designation, so that's a technical manual. That's typical for Department of Defense instructional publications. So this is the TM Trident 9, and it is the operation manual for the silencer. And just to note, throughout this video, I'm going to use the term suppressor and silencer interchangeably because those terms are interchangeable. So again, the Trident was created over a decade ago by a company called SWR. SWR originally stood for Southeastern Weapons Repair, and that company was started by a gentleman by the name of Joe Gaddini. The name Southeastern Weapons Repair, which had started out as a Title II firearm repair shop, gave way to Southeastern Weapons Research, and then finally to SWR Manufacturing LLC. So if I have my history correct, Joe Gaddini had first started SWR in Evans, Georgia. Then gradually, as SWR evolved, it went from Evans, Georgia to South Carolina, and you can see the old address here on the technical manual is Pickens, South Carolina. I feel like they were also in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, and then on the actual suppressor unit, you can see Easley, South Carolina, engraved there with the laser. When Joe Gaddini started SWR as a weapons repair shop in Georgia, he actually simultaneously went down to Central Florida and worked for Knight's Armament Corporation, KAC. After meeting Reed Knight. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Knight's Armament Corporation. So then SWR went from weapons repair to suppressor manufacturing. Joe had a friend named John Weaver, and he was helping Joe out with some machining, and had some machining tools. And John Weaver came up with the name for the baffle technology that's used in the SWR Trident, and is actually used in all of the legacy SWR products, and that's the name Omega. The baffles inside the Trident 9 silencer, the HEMS silencer, which was a 45 caliber silencer, the Warlock, which is the predecessor to the 22 caliber Spectre suppressor, previously a sealed 22 silencer by SWR, the Spectre, the Trident, and the Octane, the Omega suppressor manufactured by SWR and the SPECWAR manufactured by SWR. All of those names are now familiar to you due to their use in the SilencerCo product lines, but we'll get to that in a moment. So Joe, running the company for a while, needed some help, as people running companies tend to do. And folks like Henry Graham, Matt Pallett, William Ellison helped out Joe, kind of became SWR. I know that Henry Graham ended up running SWR and eventually sold the company to SilencerCo. So that's why you see all of these names and nomenclature present in the SilencerCo product lines now. And that's just because when SilencerCo acquired SWR, I suppose they acquired all of the naming conventions as well. They actually even took the SWR acronym and started naming it something else. But I guess the old school fans of these things still know that it basically stands for Southeastern Weapons Research, and kind of as a legacy tribute to Joe, Mr. Weaver, who passed away, but named the baffles, the Omega, and of course Henry and Matt and Mr. Ellison. So with that out of the way, I hope that was educational. We can go into the actual product here. So this is a legacy product. This silencer is no longer made. This is the Trident 9. So this sound suppressor or silencer is intended to be used on 9mm chambered weapons. The Trident nomenclature comes from the modular nature of the silencer itself. So how does this work, and how do silencers work in general? So when you fire a weapon, specifically a firearm, and I'll get a firearm here to show you. This is a Sig Sauer P226 9mm semi-automatic pistol. Go ahead and verify safety. You can see that the weapon is unloaded. The breech is clear. Okay, and decock the weapon. So this is a typical semi-automatic pistol. When you fire the weapon, the firing pin impacts the primer. The primer charge initiates burning of the powder within the firearm cartridge. That rapid burning, and in the case of pistols, very rapid burning of that powder, forces the projectile, the bullet, into the bore, into the barrel. The bullet is pushed through the barrel, being driven into the rifling, spinning the bullet. The bullet exits the bore, and of course, immediately after that bullet exits the bore or the muzzle, you have hot propellant gases exiting into the atmosphere. So when you have those propellant gases entering the atmosphere, in general, when you create a sudden rise in overpressure, a blast wave is formed. And that blast wave expands spherically in 3D space out from the point of origin or the source. So that's one source of noise when you fire a firearm. The second source of noise when you fire a firearm is the path of the projectile. As the projectile flies through the air, if it approaches the speed of sound, in what we call the transonic regime, or it surpasses the speed of sound in what we call this supersonic regime. A sonic crack is similar to a common vernacular. You may have heard a sonic boom when you have an aircraft flying past the speed of sound is formed. And that noise is typically observed by the shooter a little bit downrange, but it is kind of akin to a crack of a whip. That's a good analogy for that sound. So we've gone over two sources of noise. The first noise being the impact of the hot expanding gases into the atmosphere, forming the blast wave. The second being the supersonic or transonic flight characteristics and subsequent sound signature of the projectile. And the third, and this mainly applies to semi-automatic and fully automatic firearms, and that's the mechanical operation of the weapon. So earlier when I checked and showed you that this weapon was safe, I let the slide return to battery. Okay, so what I did was I opened the slide, and as you could tell when I just did that, there was some noise, right? And so in typical operation of a firearm, you're going to have this slide, which is part of the machine, it's part of the mechanism. You're going to have it move rearward upon ignition of the primer and the propellant, and the force of the projectile being expelled from the barrel. You're going to have that move rearward, and that has a noise. And then when it comes back very quickly, you're going to have a noise. So that noise is going to occur every time you fire the weapon. So the reason I'm describing that to you is because you need to know, if you're interested in using firearm silencers, you need to know that the host weapon and all of the characteristics involved with operation of that host weapon will influence the sound signature that you will observe both as the shooter and an observer downrange or adjacent to you or in other locations. In a future video, I'll describe some of the other sound signature inducing characteristics of firearms, such as port noise, different actions, and how they influence blowback and pressure pulses occurring through other sources of the firearm, but that's a topic for a later date. So, now that you understand what makes a firearm loud, how do you make it quieter? Well, enter the silencer. So the silencers work by slowing down the interaction of hot propellant gases with the atmosphere, right? So you can't really fight the projectile speed. You can use subsonic ammunition. You can move your ammunition at a slower velocity to get away from causing a sonic crack in the transonic or supersonic regime. But that's changing ammunition. So one thing you really have to do if you really want to quiet your weapon down is you want to slow the interaction with those expanding gases. So you have to trap them. And that's what a silencer is. That's what the muffler on your car does. And interestingly enough, if you want to learn more about the history of silencers and how they came about, you can go to Google and you can go to Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has a pretty decent article on silencers, and you can read about how the development of firearm silencer actually occurred concurrently with the development of the automobile muffler. So I think that's something that you should probably learn about if you're not aware of that, and it's pretty cool. So when you keep the gases contained within the silencer, the gases are allowed to expand in something that we note the expansion chamber. Then the gases are allowed to cool. and then they're allowed to be released to the atmosphere in a much more controlled fashion, thus quieting or silencing the host weapon. So how do silencers contain the gases? So several things are going on within the body of the silencer. So first, like I said, the gas is expanding into an initial cavity. Okay. As the projectile that's fired from the firearm travels through the bore, the projectile is propelled by gases behind it. As the projectile travels down the bore, those gases are allowed to expand radially. So axially you have a projectile coming like that, and radially, around the circumference of that bore, you have gases expanding. As they expand, and as the projectile continues to travel axially through the bore, the gases encounter obstacles, and in the case of a firearm silencer, they're encountering what we call baffles. And so what I mentioned earlier, the namesake of many of the current silencers in the market, the Omega, these baffles that are inside the Trident, they were nicknamed the Omega baffle. And so what those do, those baffles and the successive rings formed by those baffles create turbulence, and that turbulence induces internal vortices and little volume pockets that trap the gas, and the gas cools, and as it cools, it then exits the exit aperture here at the end much more slowly than it would if it was free to exit the muzzle of the firearm. So what are some cool features of this silencer specifically? Well, the Trident 9, again, this thing's over a decade old. Okay, there's been some advancements in silencer technology since this thing hit the market, but there's certain things that the Trident still has that really hold true, and it's something that I guess is often copied. So one thing that SWR did when a lot of other manufacturers were not doing it because they said it wasn't required, was SWR decided, you know what, for our first baffle in our silencer, we're gonna make it out of stainless steel. Okay, one thing about the Trident and a lot of other pistol suppressors and the modular suppressors that want to keep a light weight is that the baffle stack, or each successive baffle within the tube, are constructed of aluminum. Well, SWR, being the innovative guys that they were, said, hey, we want to make our silencer pretty durable, and we want to make sure that the initial path of the silencer and the initial path through the bore that the hot expanding gases and other products such as unburned propellant see is stainless steel. As you can imagine, the wear resistance of stainless steel, specifically hardened steel, is higher than that of aluminum, and by constructing the blast baffle, or first baffle in the stack, of stainless steel, SWR was able to create a very, very durable silencer. This silencer has many, many, many rounds through it, and you can see that the aperture of the initial blast baffle is not eroded at all. So this silencer was created back when user serviceable silencers were not really something that the market was demanding in mass, I guess. That it wasn't a significant factor for people purchasing silencers on the civilian market. And it should be noted that civilians are much harder on their silencers than than government and military customers are. Civilians tend to play a lot more with their gear and use it for long sustained use, more so than many government and military customers do. So as silencers have become more and more popular with the civilian market, you can now purchase silencers in which you can remove the baffle staff for cleaning, specifically when you are firing a very dirty caliber like .22, and even a 9mm, particularly when you're firing bullets that are not jacketed around their base. Actually, even a full metal jacket bullet around its base is often exposed lead, and not a so-called total metal jacket, but only full metal jacket. And a full metal jacket bullet does have the characteristic in that lead will vaporize from its base and coat the internals. So the SWR Trident is a modular suppressor, and actually this is one of the first modular designs that hit the market. So you have a couple of different things you can use, and I don't have all of them, but I do have two of them. The first is a 3-lug adapter. So the 3-lug adapter was offered by SWR and is currently offered by many silencer manufacturers to connect to the Heckler & Koch, the H&K MP5 submachine gun. It's interesting, H&K really never intended the 3-lug mechanism to be used for the attachment of silencers. On the MP5 Navy, you can see that the barrel is actually threaded forward of the 3-lug. The 3-lug was really, I believe, intended to use flash suppressors. Nonetheless, I actually love using the 3-lug on my 9mm AR-15, and it works pretty well. The way that the adapters for the Trident fit into the Trident suppressor main body is the Trident has an aluminum tube. It has a steel thread insert. You take the aluminum mount and you screw it with standard right-hand threads. And boom, you have a contained 3-lug 9mm silencer. So how does a 3-lug mount work? Well, there is a spring inside the mount, and that spring is around an axial opening there. That is a steel lug piston, and that piston has an O-ring and it slides within this aluminum mount body. So what you can do is you can attach this to any barrel that it's fitted with a dimensionally accurate 3-lug. So here's one. This is a 9mm AR-15, and you can see I have a 3-lug adapter on this barrel. You see there's a spacer washer on there because of a lack of thread relief on this barrel I got. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, you got this 3-lug opening here. Let me show you these lugs close up. So you see these machined lugs? That was intended by H&K for flash suppressor use, and on the MP5, actually, the MP5 Navy, there's a threaded portion here of the barrel. So what you do is, you take your 3-lug, you put it on the adapter, you push and twist, and it's locked in place. So now you have a silencer that is on the weapon. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to unscrew. You can fire many rounds with it. With the SWR, it's actually full auto rated. You can put it on a machine gun, submachine gun, whatever you like, as long as it's 9mm or 300 blackout subsonic, or any other caliber it's rated for. You just don't want to put it on a 22. You don't want to vaporize too much lead into it. But yeah, that's how the 3-lug adapter works. You can just as easily remove that mount and say, oh man, now I want to use it on my pistol. Well, you can do that too. Here we have something called what SWR called the LCD, or the linear cycling device. Another name for this is a Nielsen device. Another name for it is a recoil booster. The name that I like to use for it is an inertial decoupler, because that's what it's doing. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you here. So you have the silencer main body. Now your silencer is set up for use on a semi-automatic pistol. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, we have the 226 unloaded, decocked. I'm going to remove the thread protector. The thread protector on this is a European gun, so it's left-hand threaded, so to loosen it I got to turn to the right. Okay. The piston within the inertial decoupler is actually left-hand threaded as well, so it will work on the barrel. Okay, make sure everything's tight. And now your pistol is set up for silence firing. So the way an inertial decoupler works is, you can imagine if you're going to shoot a pistol that's been engineered to cycle a steel slide rearward to load another round from the magazine into the chamber, fire again, and so forth, hanging a bunch of mass off the end is going to influence that function. So some clever folks thought, well, what if we made it so that the gun really didn't know something was on the end of it? Okay, so that's why it's called an inertial decoupler. There's a spring around this stainless steel piston that you see here within the inertial decoupler body. So when you fire the gun, and the very quick action of the this is actually a modified Browning action on the Sig 226. When the weapon unlocks, see how the barrel kind of drops? When that happens, that's happening so quick that the spring inside the inertial decoupler is allowed to compress. As it compresses, I'm going to pull it apart here. So I'm going to grasp the firearm here, and this all happens very quickly when you're firing the gun. You can pull it. You see how that spring compresses? So what that's doing is it's keeping the inertial force, that's the mass of the silencer times the rearward acceleration. It's keeping that force at bay, allowing the slide to cycle backward and return to battery as if the inertial force is not there, because that spring force counteracts it. So I think that's pretty cool. An inertial decoupler is the only way that you'll be able to fire a tilting barrel or modified Browning action with a big weight hanging on the end. I should note that there actually are some semi-automatic firearms that are able to be cycled without an inertial decoupler. One such weapon is the Beretta M9. and that ubiquitous 9mm pistol has a little bit of a different action, and with very light silencers doesn't need an inertial decoupler, but most of them do. And the Trident did something cool in that the inertial decoupler was completely outside the main silencer body, so it really allowed for easy replacement and cleaning, and it's a true modular design. So to remove it, again, these are left-handed threads, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it to the right. All right, and you can remove that. So let's talk maintenance really quick. This is a sealed 9mm silencer. It's very debatable on how you would want to clean one of these, or if you even do want to clean it at all. I don't clean it. I don't shoot the silencer wet. That is, I don't put in a blade of medium in the silencer. I don't put any water in it, which you can do to make it quieter, but I don't. The Trident 9 is quiet enough as it is. So because I don't put any water in it, the only ignition products that are in here are some carbon and maybe some little bit of vaporized lead, depending on the types of 9mm bullets I shoot. So I don't really clean it. But one thing that you do need to clean, and you really need to keep up on this, no matter what silencers you use, is you need to clean your mounts. When you don't clean your mounts, you're going to get alignment issues, you're going to get fouling, you're going to get things that get stuck and don't come apart. So there's certain tools that you can use with the Trident. So for the 3-lug adapter, one tool didn't come with the silencer originally, and that was a spanner wrench. Reportedly, you can even use the end of an AR-15 cleaning handle to insert in these little machined holes here. One thing about the SWR products is the machining was just awesome, man. The finish was always uniform. The machining was awesome, always in spec. Man, it's such good stuff. So if you insert the spanner tool here, these are standard right-hand threads, so you can turn it. Turn it. And you can see the 3-lug piston. You see the spring that allows you to compress this stainless steel cylinder, which slides in the aluminum body, that allows you to push past the 3 lugs and then rotate and lock in place. And you see you got that high temperature O-ring right there. That's important. You can see it's kind of shiny because it's all greased up. I have not cleaned this since my last outing, so I need to do that. To reassemble, kind of snap that O-ring back in place. And you're good to go. So looking at the inertial decoupler, or the LCD, or the recoil booster, or whatever you want to call it, it also requires maintenance, and this one's admittedly pretty dirty. So SWR included a machined aluminum tool that had some pins. You're going to want to use, for the Trident, you're going to want to use the pins that are closest together. I believe the ones that are further apart were for the 45 caliber HEM suppressor. So you put that on the end and you turn. You can do the rest by hand. And you see that that ring comes out. You can see the piston, which rides within the aluminum body, is there. the piston has some holes in it for expanding gases. Those expanding gases are actually forced through these holes, and that's part of the suppression mechanism technology within the Trident. And you have that spring, which I showed you, acts to counteract the inertial force of the silencer. So I'm going to put that back on, and I'm going to screw it back down. You don't have to He-Man this thing, just snug tight's fine. Now let's talk storage. So the Trident originally came with a Velcro ballistic nylon pouch. The pouch was really simple and super easy to use, and you could fit the mounts on it, and because of the long string of hook and loop closure here, or Velcro, you could close it and you'd be good to go. For whatever reason, and it's been several years now, I can't quite remember the entire reason. I think it was because I wanted to protect more of the body than just this length. I purchased a flare pouch from Blackhawk. Man, I must have bought this, I don't know how many years it's been, but this is kind of a more secure closure, that it has a buckle as well as Velcro. And I rarely am carrying the Trident without the module installed. Nowadays, I've enjoyed this so much on my 9mm AR-15 that I usually have the 3-lug adapter on it. And this flare pouch is actually the perfect length. It does have an adjustable closure, and it has a little, loop on the back. You can put this on your pack, on your belt, things like that. I oftentimes take the spanner wrench and I slide it in there for use in my range bag or my backpack or wherever I'm going to shoot, and it kind of stays in there and it's pretty good to go. So how does the Trident 9 suppressor or silencer perform? What does it sound like? Well, you can look up videos of the silencer online. In my opinion, when you shoot silencers, video recording and the audio recording that's used on a lot of videos really doesn't do the sound justice. It's good for sometimes comparison between different host weapons, between different silencers, but to really get a feel for what it sounds like, I find that relating it to common sounds is more useful for the users or even the prospective buyers. I can tell you that when I shoot the Trident 9 on my 9mm AR-15, it sounds sort of like a pneumatic nail gun. And when I shoot it on the Sig 226 9mm, which by the way is one of the best 9mm pistol host weapons, if you don't have a 226, you should get one because it's awesome. But if you shoot silencers, man, you really need a Sig 226. I actually think everyone should have one of these pistols. But nonetheless, when fired on the 226, the SWR also sort of sounds like a pneumatic nail gun with a little bit more of a clack. And it all depends on where you are. If you're the shooter, you're going to be hearing that clack of the slide, similar to when you hear the bolt close shut on the action of the AR-15. So you're still going to hear that action noise. So with subsonic ammunition, you're looking at a nail gun type sound signature. With supersonic, the report of the 9mm cartridge is still pleasant to the shooter. With supersonic ammunition, with the Trident, it's not going to be unpleasant. You're still going to be able to shoot it without hearing protection. Now, that being said, you really need to be careful both of the host weapon that you use it on, as far as loudness and port pop through the ejection port, but you really need to be careful of reflecting surfaces. So when you shoot a silencer and you are standing under an awning, for example, perhaps you're close to the ground, perhaps there's a wall behind you or adjacent to you. Maybe worst case would be in a hallway where you have the floor and the ceiling and the two walls. And even if you had your back to a wall, you would be in a three-sided cubicle. And three-sided cubicles are very, very good at amplifying waves. And when waves impact surfaces, they tend to coalesce and amplify, and you can get more than twice the peak amplitude of the wave when you're near a surface. So that being said, keep that in mind for the desired sound signature you're trying to achieve when you use a silencer. And I think when you have those expectations in mind that are reasonable, I think you'll be a lot happier. It should be said that silencers or sound suppressors do not make a weapon silent by any means. They simply reduce the sound signature to a level that is desirable for your current operations, whether that be for military or law enforcement use, for self-defense use for a civilian in their home, for hunting and not wanting to blow the ears out of your hunting partner or your dog or whoever or whatever is with you, or in general for shooters who just want to keep the noise down and shoot with better feelings and awareness of their surroundings. It's a tool just like anything else, and I love using them. And they're really easy to acquire for folks in the United States, in states that are still operating under those free rules. You can pay a tax to the ATF, an organization that's part of the Department of Justice. Go through your background check and wait, and then you too can enjoy shooting quietly. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at the SWR Trident. I really like the silencer. I've used it for many years, and it has provided a lot of fun, a lot of good service, and I really like that the legacy of this technology is still living on in other products. SilencerCo does offer the legacy SWR Octane, but now it should be said that there's a new company called Rugged Suppressors, and Henry Graham of SWR is running that company, and they have silencers such as the Obsidian, the Razor, the Surge, some rifle silencers, rimfire silencers, the Oculus, the pistol silencers. There's all kinds of stuff, and they all use similar evolutions of the Omega baffle. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative. Please subscribe to the channel, and you can look forward to many more firearm accessory reviews and firearm technology reviews at the J Situation. Thanks again.
Pew, pew.